Stephen King said he has seen the face of horror, and it's named Clive Barker. Alright, let's talk Clive Barker. Clive Barker used to be a huge horror author back in the 90s and 2000s. He was considered as a great author as Stephen King. However, in recent years, I feel that he has been kind of forgotten for many new readers, probably because of his health issues that do not allow him to publish books more frequently, and also because of his latest books being not quite as good as his older work. And you probably heard the name Clive Barker, you're probably aware of the Hellraiser movies. The first movie was directed by Clive Barker himself, and he was actively involved with the movies while they were good. He's also well known for his other movies, Nightbreed and Lord of Illusion. He has a couple of video games, one of which, Undying, is a cult classic. He has made comics, art books. There are many movie adaptations of him. Candyman, of course, is created by Clive Barker himself. So you start to see, if you're a horror fan, that yes, you're very aware of who Clive Barker is and what his works are and why they're important. However, there are many people who have not read Clive Barker, and maybe they're considering, where should I start? Stephen King said he has seen the face of horror, and it's named Clive Barker. Yeah, he was very modest about it, because Clive Barker was a great writer and he brought in a lot of new sensibilities to horror. And I can speak for hours about why Clive Barker is so important. Okay, Stephen King is pretty much a very prolific author, to the point that there are jokes in Family Guy about how he's writing books.
Okay, for my 307th book, this couple is attacked by a lamp monster.
Clive Barker is not prolific, he's a much more eclectic author. He has far fewer books, and also many of his books belong in different genres, and he mostly goes and uses some very similar themes and tropes in his books. But his books range from horror to fantasy. He also has children's and YA books. Believe it or not, I wouldn't give my child with a Clive Barker book, but some people probably would, so who knows. So, where do you start reading Clive Barker? Well, if you want to have the horror experience that made Stephen King say that Clive Barker is the face of horror, you should probably go with the Books of Blood, Volume 1, which was the book that Stephen King blurbed as such. That's one of the best horror story collections ever. It is a great book. It has some amazing stories in there. Big Blood Blues. It has The Gathering Jack, which is hilarious. It's comedy horror, and it also has Midnight Meat Train, which starts off as a slasher horror, and then it effortlessly goes into cosmic horror, and I was blown away by this. It is one of my favorite horror stories. And of course, it has In the Hills, the Cities, which is probably one of the best horror stories of all time, and you should definitely read this. There are no words to explain what this story is about. You have to read it to believe it. And you can probably not go wrong with the Books of Blood, Volume 2 to 6. Each of the other books has some amazing stories. I mean, Candyman was in book 5, I believe, and so was Lord of Illusions. Volume 2 has Dread, which is also an amazing psychological horror story, also one of my favorite horror stories of all time. So yes, you see that out of 2 books, you get 3 of my favorite horror stories. That tells you quite a lot about these books, and you have to read them to believe them. Okay, after Volume 3, some of the stories blend together in my head, so that's why I'll say start Volume 1. But there are great stories in all 6 of the Books of Blood. If you want to have some longer fiction in horror, Clive Barker, my second suggestion would be The Hellbound Heart. It's the novella on which Hellraiser was based on. It is a great story about a man who is looking ultimate pleasure, and found this cube, the Lament configuration. You probably know what I'm talking about because Hellraiser it redefined a lot of horror with this aesthetics, and this story is quite as good as the movie itself, maybe better in some aspects because Clive Barker is a better author than a director, okay? But this story is condensed Clive Barker goodness. His crazy ideas, his amazing iconography, his will to go take the extra mile in the gore and just go all in on the gore details, his sensitivity, his interesting characters that are not good or bad exactly. These are all elements you'll find in all Clive Barker books, but here they are in a book this size. Yeah, it's called Hellraiser, it's the Greek edition. It's very condensed and you definitely get your Clive Barker fix out of reading it. The Hellbound Heart also has a sequel called The Scarlet Gospels. It was published in 2015, and if you like Hellbound Heart, definitely do not read The Scarlet Gospels because that book is awful. I know if you're a big Hellraiser fan, you want to read it. I know, I've read it. And I regret the day I did that because the first 100 pages of this book are kind of good. Not Clive Barker good, but good. And after that, the book is very rushed, very inconsistent, very sloppily written, and it felt that it was either ghost written or that Clive Barker's writing talent died and its ghost wrote this book. Yes, I'm harsh, but stay away from this book. Don't read this book. Burn it. No, that's another book of Clive Barker. There's another book of Clive Barker, you should not read it and burn it. And it starts with this phrase. My third suggestion for starting with Clive Barker, it will be Weaveworld. And Weaveworld was published in 1987. It's Clive Barker's magnum opus. It's a dark fantasy novel. There are some horror elements there, but it's mostly fantasy. It's about a carpet, a tapestry, which hides an entire magical world within. The fugue, it's basically the magical creatures that have gathered and hid in this tapestry to protect themselves from humans, as well as some supernatural foes they have. It's very long and it's very good. It's really Clive Barker at his peak, and yeah, you should definitely put this book in your to-read list if you're interested in Clive Barker. Also, if you're more of a fantasy fan, you may be interested in Imajica from 1991. It's a fantasy novel, it's a standalone fantasy novel, so yeah, you don't wait for the next book to come in the series, and I haven't read this one personally, but I've heard some great comments by people I trust, so you can go for it. Clive Barker also has a YA series called Abarat. He has published 3 out of 5 books of the series, and they are illustrated by him, and I'm not planning to read this book unless it's finished, and judging by how late it is, because book 1 was published in 2002, book 2 was published in 2004, book 3 was published in 2011, and we have yet to see another book of the series announced, so I'm not sure if I'll read that. And also there's another series by Clive Barker called The Books of the Art that contain The Great and Secret Soul from 1989 and Everville from 1994, and there's a third book that hasn't come out yet. As far as I remember, The Great and Secret Soul was sort of wrapping a lot of things in it, so I'll reread this because I want to also read Everville one of these days. So let me show you the book because I have got this. And if you don't mind reading a series that may never be finished, definitely you can try that. It's mostly horror with some fantasy elements thrown in there. It's about 2 people who get magical powers and they terrorize a small city with their war, and it's kind of interesting. It's Clive Barker trying to write a Stephen King novel. You can also read The Damnation Game, which was his debut, and Cold Hard Canyon from 2001. They're both some good horror novels, very solid. You can go for them. They're not my first picks for Clive Barker, but you can read them. You can also read Cabal from 1988. It's also a novella. It was made in the movie Nightbreed. It's very interesting. It's mostly horror, but we can see the shift towards dark fantasy because it's about a man who encounters a city of monster, Median, underneath a cemetery. And yes, there are some great ideas in Clive Barker. I mean, Cabal had Median, and The Greatest Secrets of had Quiddity. The idea of parallel dimensions is a trope we see in a lot of Clive Barker books. If you want a lighter read, you can also go for The Thief of Always. It's a children's book by Clive Barker, so I guess it will be some spooky fun. It will be an easy read. It will be a great Halloween book. I mean, adults can probably appreciate this book too. I have yet to read it. I probably will. I'm currently reading his book Sacrament from 1996, which feels more like a magical realism story rather than a horror book. Expect a review for this book when I'm done with it. And if you're interested in being notified when this review comes out, press subscribe and also the bell. Do not read Mr. Big Gun. I was warned by people I trust not to do that, and I didn't, and I'm kind of curious if I should read this. But then again, I've read The Scarlet Gospel and I was furious, so I'll probably skip that. And yeah, that's pretty much my suggestion for how to start with Clive Barker and what books you should prioritize, and if you want to skip some books. Hope this video was of help, and I'll see you soon. Thank you for watching.